Emancipation was barely covered in my history classes. It was like a 10-minute footnote to the Civil War. We weren't taught about its implementation or lasting repercussions. We never discussed what it meant to be enslaved for generations and then freed overnight, or how people raised within slavery coped with sudden freedom. And this was at one of the best schools in the state, which only makes it a bigger missed opportunity. The version that we got was pretty simple. Lincoln freed the slaves, they were happy, and some became politicians, academics, or business owners. And I never really questioned how accurate that picture was or who it truly applied to. Born at the end of the Jim Crow era and raised in Connecticut, I grew up where racism swung from subtle to blatant. And even in my teenage brain, I sensed a huge missing piece in the story of Black America post-emancipation. I couldn't name it, and eventually I just stopped thinking about it. Living abroad for most of my adult life, away from the hurly-burly of America's racial tensions, well, it made it pretty easy to forget. But returning home and diving into the Freedmen's Bureau archives, well, it brought that disconnection back into sharp relief. America has long avoided confronting its darker history, believing, that silence would somehow erase the pain. But it doesn't. It never does. As I've learned, and as the Irish, the Welsh, the Cornish, and the Scottish can attest in the British side of the world, dark chapters leave wounds that echo through the generations. It's 2025, and all you have to do is glance at the headlines to see it. The past is never really past. And lately, I find myself thinking about emancipation, about the millions freed after generations of dreaming of it, and how dreaming of freedom and living it are two very different things. History shows us this clearly. The Arab Spring, post-communist Eastern Europe. Freedom is never simple. There are no Freedom 101 courses, no smooth transition from oppression to self-determination. Freedom is a messy, painful, often chaotic process. And that's not to diminish it, because freedom is a basic human right. But the path to it is rarely easy. And I've yet to see an example where the leap from bondage to full responsibility was anything but tumultuous. Say their names: Tobey and Ainsley Roane. Tobias, or Tobey Roane, and his wife Ainsley, of Essex County, Virginia, are heartbreaking examples of lives caught up in the chaos that followed emancipation. By 1868, Toby and Ainsley were in their 80s, old, fragile, and broken by a lifetime of forced labor. Yet even in their frailty, they bore a heavy burden. They were the sole caregivers of their 3 young grandchildren. We don't know the children's names, nor what fate had befallen their parents. That part of the story, like so much of their lives, has been lost to time. But an 1866 letter from Second Lieutenant Watson R. Wentworth of the Freedmen's Bureau tells what little we do know. At the end of the Civil War, Toby, Ainsley, and their 3 grandchildren were forced out of their home, likely discarded by the man who once claimed to own them, who saw no further use for the elderly and infirm. They found a grim refuge in a crumbling stable on the edge of a property owned by John A. Parker. It's unclear whether Toby had any prior connection to Parker or the McGuire family, who were Parker's white tenants, who worked the land. What is clear is that Parker resented their presence, even in a broken down shed no longer fit for animals. Toby and Ainsley had survived the chains of slavery, only to be cast adrift in freedom's storm, elderly, exhausted, and clinging to what little family they had left. An 1866 Freedmen's Bureau report read, Tobey Roane and his wife, each about 80 years of age, are crippled and has them small grandchildren who have no father or mother living. In November 1866, John Parker, whose abandoned stable Tobey Roane and his wife and his family used as shelter, filed a complaint with the Freedmen's Bureau, as documented in a report by Lieutenant Wentworth in the Tappahannock, Essex County, Virginia. And the complaint reads as follows. I have the honor to forward through your office to the Assistant Commissioner the following report in compliance with the enclosed endorsement I embraced this affair of injustice to Freedmen in my report of the condition of Bureau Affairs. And it reads as follows. In October, I then reported it about as it transpired. It is John A. Parker, who I understand lives in Dinwiddie County, Virginia, is the owner of a house and lot in this town, situated at the foot of Main Street on the bank of the Rappahannock River. He has rented this house and lot to a Mr. John P. McGuire. Mr. John Johns is the son-in-law of Mr. McGuire and an attorney of law living in Richmond City, who forwarded this complaint against me, and this was the Freedmen Bureau agent that they were complaining about, with the view of having me removed from this place, though I hope a thorough investigation may be had before this is done. This is the second time that they have tried to have me removed from this place, and it is only because I do not coincide with them in all of their inhuman treatment towards the freedmen, and because they cannot buttonhole me around as they did my predecessor. At the foot of Queen Street, just 1 square from Parker's house, is an old stable, which this freedman occupies and is situated under the bank of the river, Parker's house being upon the bank. This old stable is not fenced in with Parker's lot, and it stands on the sandy beach. Some few years ago, this building was used as a stable, but now unfit to put a home in. And before he, the freedman, went into it, there was no door on it, and it was free to anyone and so used. And it is plain to be seen that it is almost out of sight and hearing of Parker's house. And the report continues. This old freedman and his wife, both over 80 years of age and also crippled, tell me that they were turned out of house and home by their former master. And I am deeply impressed with the truth of this statement. Although Mr. McGuire says that his former owner has offered to provide for him and his family for their labor. And for this reason, that some time ago I ordered his former master, Mr. Wilson, to appear before the Freedmen's Court, which I'd done to get clothing for this old freedman and his wife to cover their nakedness, for what work they had already done for him. He refused to appear and refused to give them the clothing in compliance with the decision of the court. This is the way that Wilson, Parker, and all provide for their laborers. The old freedman, having no place to go to for shelter, went into this old stable, and I furnished him with rations. Not long since, Parker came to me and asked me if I would order them out of the stable. I said I would see what I could do for them. I then gave the old freedman a note to pass on to one of the trustees of the poor, asking the trustees of the poor to give the old man and wife shelter. The trustee of the poor sent the old man back, saying there was no house for him and no provision made for his race. I said nothing more to the freedman. 2 days after that, Parker came to me and abused me shamefully and said that he would hold me responsible for their not leaving the stable. And while standing on my boarding house step and in the presence of my wife, called me a goddamn Yankee and used other filthy expressions. At the same time, shaking his fist in my face, for which of course I resented, and I gave him a good thrashing. I then told Parker he should not put the old man out of the stable under any circumstances. He then brought suit against the old man, Tobey Roane, for the possession of his tenement, as he calls it. More properly speaking, more his hog pen, which I knew nothing of until Tobey Roane came to me and said that the sheriff had put his things outdoors. I do not know that it was by order of the court, for I did not think they would be so small and mean as to bring suit for that building. I then went to the old stable and found that Tobey Roane had moved his things back. I told him to remain there until the civil authorities thought proper to furnish him with another house. And 2 hours after, I heard it was done by order of the court. And I afterwards told Mr. Thomas Croxton that I should keep them there until my commanding officer told me to do otherwise. These people are getting worse every day. These traitorous deeds since I came here are too numerous to mention. They would at the throats of every freedman were it not for the law, that detestable Freedmen's Bureau. I have acted in this case, as in all others, looking to humanity and to justice. I am determined that the freedmen shall not be trampled upon as long as I am an officer in this bureau. And I hope that the assistant commissioner will not think it proper to remove me from this place, as that is what these people are aiming at. For I think I have acted justly. I, and in compliance with my orders, respectfully refer to you my report of today, giving the reasons why the civil authorities refuse to care for their indigent freed people. The indignity of Toby and his small family's plight did not end there. Parker began court proceedings to have them evicted from said derelict stable, their only refuge. In desperation, Toby applied for relief to the local poorhouse via the local office for the Freedmen's Bureau. The letter I am about to read shows how Toby and his family were turned away from the poorhouse solely based on race, and it reads, dated 9th of November, 1866, written by Second Lieutenant and Assistant Superintendent Wentworth. I received an order from the Assistant Commissioner a few days since asking me to report the reasons why civil authorities refuse to take charge of indigent freed people in this subdistrict. By some means, I have lost that order and therefore request that I be furnished with another copy to place on file in this office. I make the following report in compliance with that order. I called upon the clerk of the county court of Essex County and asked him if the court had any provisions for the support of indigent freed people. He said that the court had made such provisions and that the colored people had been taxed for that purpose as well as the whites. I then told him that an old crippled freedman had tried to get admittance into the poorhouse, but was turned away, the trustee saying that there was no provisions made for his race. He merely intimated that the trustee did not do his duty. I have since called upon that trustee and asked him why he did not give this old freedman, Tobey Roane, in order to get into the poorhouse. He said there was no provisions made for the colored people, that the levy made by the court, which the clerk alludes to, was made to defray the expenses of the poorhouse last year and not for this year, and that when provisions were made, they would not be put into the county poorhouse, but put into another piece of land which would be laid off for them. I again called upon the clerk of the court and stated to him what the trustee had told me. The clerk then read to me the order of the court, which says that upwards of $1,400 is to be raised for the support of the poor during that present year, being a tax of $1.80 per head, black and white. The president of the Board of Trustees declares that he will not accept a colored man into the poorhouse until other provisions are made for them. This is all the information I can get from the authorities upon this subject. Wentworth again formally petitioned the county poorhouse to accept Toby and his family on the 24th of December, 1866, in a document that reads, I obtained an order from the county court to admit Tobey Roane and family into the county poorhouse. And if the trustees of the poor do not admit the remainder of the district's freed people into the poorhouse, as they do with white paupers, I shall try and get an order from the next county court to compel the trustees to admit them, as I did in the case of Tobey Roane. The letters Lieutenant Wentworth wrote about Tobey Roane and his family are just a glimpse into the bureaucratic labyrinth faced by newly freed Black Americans. They reveal not only the cold machinery of the system, but the deep prejudice that shaped every outcome. Frankly, I don't see any decency. I don't see any true Christian charity in this story, save for one man, Second Lieutenant Watson Wentworth. Whoever his descendants are, they should be proud. He stood alone in danger and duty when it would have been far easier to just look away. I don't know how Toby and his family's story ended. I don't know if eventually the poorhouse ever took them in, even if it was only under orders. I hope they did. I hope someone somewhere showed them mercy. The obvious question lingers. Where was Toby's extended family? And it's a fair question. Toby belonged to a generation of Roanes in Essex County. Some of them are Spencer Roane, born 1797, Nelson Roane, born in 1810, George Roane, again, another born in 1810, Randall Roane, born about 1815, all men with families of their own. Survival was hard enough in these uncertain times, and perhaps they simply couldn't carry any more burdens. But the real heartbreak of Toby and Ainsley's story isn't just their poverty or their frailty at 80 years old. It's that after a lifetime, after decades of love and family and endurance, this single miserable episode is all that survives of them on record. No traces of the births they must have celebrated, the laughter they must have shared, the ordinary joys that made their lives whole. Just a sad, cruel footnote. I've poured through thousands of Freedmen Bureau records, stories of resilience, small victories, and even laughter. But there is a darker thread too. Stories of abandonment, cruelty, and quiet suffering. For the elderly, the young, the infirm, and single mothers, freedom often meant new hardships, new humiliations in a society stubbornly refusing to see their humanity. This video began life as an article I wrote in 2014. A few weeks after posting the article, I received a surprise. And it's incredible how random events can connect strangers. After finding the article, Lieutenant Watson Wentworth's third great-grandson, and I'm just going to call him Sam N., well, he reached out to me, and he graciously shared some of Wentworth's history, which I'm actually honored to pass along here. Watson was born in 1844 and orphaned by the age of 12. His father died when he was about 6 years old. He and his sisters seem to have been left with relatives when his widowed mother and his three youngest siblings were all drowned in a shipwreck en route to Chicago via the Great Lakes. Perhaps the experience of insecurity stemming from these early tragedies somehow informed his work with the Freedmen's Bureau as a young man. This history began in 1866 with 80-year-old Toby and Ainsley Roane, both crippled by lifetimes of toil, thrown out of their home, clutching their three young grandchildren with nowhere to go but an abandoned stable. And then John A. Parker, the landowner, sued to evict them from a stable, a broken, roofless shed, unfit even for animals. But not everyone turned away. Second Lieutenant Watson Wentworth, a man who knew loss, fought for Toby and his family. He defied the powerful. He endured slander, threats, and violence. He fought not for fame, not for reward, not for recognition, but because it was right. He fought not for a reward, but again, because it was right. The United States often tells itself that if its citizens don't talk about the past, the pain will fade, that history will just work itself out. But dark chapters do not die in silence. They echo across oceans and generations. Humanity, justice, memory. This is the inheritance we owe to freedmen and women like Toby and Ainsley. The truth, the whole story, nothing less will suffice.